Okay, so today's video is how important is sleep for fat loss. So a huge factor for a good quality transformation is your sleep. Now it's hugely overlooked. Now most people just think it's all about the diet, it's all about the exercise. However, you've got to manage your variables outside of that as well, because you need to make sure you're progressing. So look at it like this: if you were to just hammer the amount of sessions you do and do low calorie, the immediate response would be to drop weight. However, the increased stress on your body would actually affect your overall cognitive function, your ability to recover, so regenerate that muscle tissue, keep muscle tissue, and then also it's going to have an effect on you then needing caffeine, for example, maybe to give yourself some form of a kick. And then these two main variables there are then going to affect your ability to fall asleep and stay asleep and get deep restorative sleep, to the point where you actually start to optimize your hormones for what is actually needed when it comes to fat loss. So this is where people go wrong. So more doesn't even always equal better. Less is often more. Because if you have a stressful job or you have a highly active job, then trying to do a lot more activity on top of what is already a higher activity is just creating a lot of stress on your body. And then when we throw in sleep into the mix, that you can't recover from that, then it makes even worse, and it makes the whole process to the point where you're not actually going to see visible results as easy. So therefore, if you have an active job and then you do less in your gym and your food's on point, then your next stage is to really look at your recovery during your sleep. So we got this basically, so to go into a bit more detail, so if I put it there I can talk through it. So what you have is, when you get lack of sleep, not only are you not going to recover properly, but it's going to create imbalances within your hormones. There are probably I've already mentioned cortisol a lot, but there's two other hormones that we haven't touched on yet, but you may have heard them, you may not. They're called leptin and ghrelin. Now, leptin is what tells your body when you're full and you're satisfied in a sense, whereas ghrelin is there to tell you when you're hungry. So what happens is, when you don't get the proper sleep, then this affects the balance between the leptin and ghrelin. So they're kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, so they work not in partnership, but opposite of each other. So it's like yin and yang. So therefore, if you actually have poor quality sleep, again, when if you've got a new baby, or you've got stress at work, this can affect your sleep to the point where the quality is bad. So by having the bad quality of sleep, then you get a decrease in the leptin hormone. So what this does is, you don't feel as satisfied by foods that you may typically be eating, and then you get an increase in ghrelin. So again, late nights won't help, being up when you shouldn't be, because just moving is going to create more calories than being asleep. So that's a factor one that's going to make you want to eat more, compared to what sticking on plan. Stress, like we've talked about, will affect sleep, and then stress requires extra calories to circulate and have an effect on your body. So increased cortisol will then go up. So again, increased cortisol and ghrelin will then have a massive effect from your overall cravings. So if you then get huge cravings for sugar or convenience foods, a lot of this can be down to your sleep. So you may think you have good sleep, but are you actually feeling restored? Do you go to bed at a regular time? Do you get deep restful sleep that you don't wake up in the night? And when you wake up in the morning, do you feel refreshed? If you're not ticking those boxes, then you need to question, is your sleep good? So like I was saying, what this then means is, because of this tiredness, because you're not actually recovering, and then if you're trying to hammer yourself with a workout, then technically these hyperpalatable foods become even more tempting, basically. So everyone has their own version of hyperpalatable foods. These are basically foods that you could eat an abundance of, and actually fall into a trap of eating them, because they're often highly calorific, highly often sugar or fat, or a combination of the both, and then it tends to be your weakness. So me, for example, I'm exactly the same. My weakness would be when I'm stressed, when I'm tired, when things are going on, I'll probably reach for more sweet stuff, being chocolate, and I could have chocolate a couple of times a day. And if I haven't factored that in, then all I'm going to do is blow my calorie deficit, and then if I blow my calorie deficit, then I'm going to affect my fat loss. So not only are you affecting your fat loss from a deficit point of view, which is the plain and simple part of it, but when we drill down into the details of it, and then you're actually affecting your hormones from lack of sleep, then this is going to make the hyperpalatable foods go up. And then not only are you going to affect it from the deficit, you're also affecting it from just being a quality of nutrients going into your body. So then if you have decreased sleep, you have decreased energy, and you have decreased activity, then at the end of the day, it's all going to have a massive factor on what you can actually achieve. So if you're doing less activity and your energy is lower, your effort in the gym is going to be less. If your activity levels are less because you don't want to move more because you're tired from lack of sleep, then all this lack of sleep becomes a vicious circle if you don't look at your sleep to then keep this ghrelin knocked up, cortisol knocked up, and leptin. So you can see what it does is it just creates a vicious circle that is just ongoing if you do not actually look at your sleep. Now, tips to help this. So I've said it a few times, is you've got to look at it that you have to optimize your sleep. So you need to really stick to a same time that you go to bed. So for example, I would look to always go to bed between 10 and 11 because I feed my little girl at about 10. And then sometimes I get in late that I do want to have a little bit of wind down time, switch off. So therefore what I want to do is really just try and have a moment to try and chill, to try and wind down, because obviously I've had a busy day or I've had a stressful day. I need that wind down time, but by setting the time to be between 10 and 11, then that's when I'm going to go to sleep. Avoiding too much blue light exposure. So in an ideal world, we should avoid blue light exposure completely, so that being phone, tablets, TVs, but in this modern day it's very unlikely. But if you can almost switch them off and then look to read before you go to sleep, about half hour before bed, that's going to make a huge difference. Something I'm trialing at the moment is blue light blockers. They're relatively inexpensive. You can order them on Amazon. I can send you the links if you want them. Again, I'd put these blue light blockers on from about 8 o'clock or whenever I get in, if I'm a bit later, like 9 o'clock. And then what this is doing is it basically blocks the blue light emitting light that's coming from phones, tablets, TVs, etc. So what this helps is it helps with the production of melatonin, because blue light basically slows down that production of melatonin, and melatonin is what helps you get into that sleep. So by using them, that blocks that, and it helps you actually wind down a little bit better and actually get more relaxed and get that melatonin going to help you get to sleep. When it comes to your bedtime routine, obviously a good temperature room, so not too hot, ambient temperature, and then making sure it's pitch black. So blackout curtains, making sure there's no light emitted. From example, I don't believe in TVs in the bedroom or any alarm clock that would effectively emit any form of light. If you do have them, then you should cover them up. If you do want an alarm, then there's two things I'd recommend instead, so then you don't have this. You're either going to look at a sleep cycle app where it will wake you naturally within a sleep cycle, or a Lumi light. Lumi light is something that basically recreates natural light, so then your waking up is a little bit more tranquil, a little bit more relaxed, rather than a quite aggressive alarm that you might be in the middle of a sleep cycle that it's quite startling when you wake up. Aside from that, obviously making sure in an ideal world not eating too close to going to sleep, because again your heart rate will be up. There'll be other variables as well. Digestion, again, some people may not notice a big difference, but it may be underlying that could be again a small factor that might help you. Making sure you don't have caffeine too later in the day, so I wouldn't really have any caffeine after 2. So I'd make sure it's in the morning or early afternoon at latest, because it does often take about 8 hours for most people for caffeine to exit the system. So if you had it at 2 and then you're going to bed at 10, it's on the verge of its way out. So again, this can affect your sleep patterns. And then just overall just trying to relax and have a routine. And then again, whether you get up the same time of day Monday to Friday or Saturday and Sunday, ideally you should get up at the same time every day, be it weekend or weekday. Again, this sets your circadian rhythm. So this circadian rhythm is what helps you obviously have a good restful sleep. And then understanding that actually your sleep cycle works in roughly 1.5 hours, so 90 minutes. So when you do go to bed, knowing that when you've got to wake up, it's trying to understand that if you have about a 20-minute fall asleep time, then you should be looking for about 20 minutes plus cycles of 90 minutes. That will ensure then you get a good restful sleep, and then your cycle isn't interrupted in the middle, so you don't feel too groggy and horrible when you wake up if you woke up in the middle of a sleep cycle. And regardless whether you had 4 or 6 sleep cycles, you'd feel better from having 4 rather than 4.5 and waking up in the middle. Once you've optimized all these different small variables, that all adds up to a big variable, and then if your sleep is better, your recovery is better. So when you sleep, you release growth hormone. Growth hormone is released for deep restful sleep is the time when you're really going to get that recovery from your resistance training, and then again we're just trying to offset the increased levels of stress and cortisol from your day and from your workouts. So when we get all this right, then what we tend to find is that recovery is better. So when you recover better, then your progress is better, and then if your deficit is there, then you'll get less cravings. And so when you put it all together, your progress for fat loss is a lot better than if your sleep is actually interrupted. And this is why, as a parent, those of you who are parents will understand that when you have the sleepless phase of having a small one in the house, it's trying to optimize as best you can your sleep around this. It is doable. It just takes more concentration than someone that is a young person with no commitments and a nice easy life. So have a think about that one, and if you have any questions, please do let me know. But remember, optimize your sleep for the best fat loss for a transformation.